Welcome to Hacking Ultra 5 Kingdom Nutrition. I've been giving a lot of thought lately how I might be able to convey my current view of nutrition and how I think the discussion around human nutrition needs to continue to evolve and mature. I think I found a model that describes the nuance that I think needs to be added to the discussion. And I'm going to introduce this model in 2 steps. First, I want to talk about the terms carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, and really the limitations of these terms. That will bring to the forefront this nuance that I think is missing in the current discussion. And then to really paint the picture for how I see things working here, I want to trace the life cycle of energy from sunlight to ATP that powers every cell in our body. And I think that will paint the picture of the mosaic that we find ourselves living in. And that will also illustrate what I mean in the subtitle as one metabolic food system. There's a follow-on video to this one that will be published at the same time. And it takes a look at my 5 Kingdom nutrition protocol and how I'm eating today. Carnivore, herbivore, omnivore. And when we're talking about human nutrition, I will use herbivore and vegan interchangeably. If we're going to use these terms, we need to understand the context and the domain of the terms we're using. And these terms have 2 major limitations when we're talking about nutritional needs of an individual organism. Number 1, these terms only address 2 kingdoms of life, animals and plants. All of the known living organisms on Earth are divided into 5 kingdoms, or 6, or 5.5, depending upon which model you accept. We'll go with the 5 kingdom model. But in addition to animals and plants, we have fungi, we have bacteria, we have protozoa. The second limitation of these terms is that they only address the nutrition relationship from the perspective of the animal. A carnivore is an animal that eats other animals. An herbivore is an animal that eats plants. An omnivore is an animal that eats plants and animals. These terms say nothing of what the plant eats that the organism eats, or what the animal eats that the other animal eats. And these terms say nothing about the intricate web of organisms that facilitate and mitigate the transfer of nutrients between plants and animals. This is the nuance of our perspective that we need to continue to evolve and bring into the conversation about human nutrition. And this can be a subtle point, because if you look at authorities on carnivore nutrition or on vegan nutrition or omnivore nutrition, everyone knows and is talking about the microbiome. Fermentation and similar techniques are well known among carnivores, vegans, and omnivores. So it's not that everyone is ignoring the other 3 kingdoms, but especially in our discussions between carnivores and vegans and comparing the various styles of eating, we are still very much divided in the plant-based, animal-based mindset, and this is what I'm suggesting needs to change. So I really want to paint this picture that I think we need to begin to see, and so I'm going to do as much oversimplification as I need to trace that energy from the sun into my cells. And I want to really appreciate this web of life that I'm a part of. So all energy on Earth originates in our sun. Most of the volume and mass of our sun exists as hydrogen. There is so much mass of hydrogen that the gravity creates pressure that crams hydrogen together, and 2 hydrogens fuse together and become helium. This is nuclear fusion. In this fusion process, radiation is emitted, including the light spectrum that we can see. Plants have photoreceptors in their leaves in the form of chlorophyll, and they can capture sunlight, say in a blade of grass. Through photosynthesis, the grass takes this energy and uses it to take carbon dioxide, CO2, that it pulled in from the atmosphere, and it breaks apart the carbon and the oxygen. It emits the oxygen, the O2, which an animal can breathe in, and it takes the carbon and builds the plant. We're all carbon-based life form, and so the structure of the grass is effectively carbon. The seed that the grass started as had all the vitamins and nutrients it needed to grow the initial plant and create the chloroplast to begin pulling in sunlight and pulling in carbon dioxide. The root system is such that can pull up minerals from the ground. After the plant has its first true set of leaves, it can start generating its own vitamins, and it continues to draw minerals from the soil. Of course, the plant can't really draw nutrients and minerals directly from the soil. There are organisms in the soil, fungi, bacteria, protozoa. This is the living soil food web, and it's actually these organisms that extract these nutrients, and the output byproducts of these organisms are what the plant actually finds as bioavailable nutrients. Now we're going to have a cow come along and eat that grass. But of course, the cow cannot get nutrients nutrients out of the grass directly. The cow has the multiple chambered stomach, and inside that cow is a microbiome. It's colonies of trillions of fungi, bacteria, protozoa, and those things consume the grass, and the output from their metabolism are the bioavailable nutrients for the cow. The cow's microbiome makes the protein and carbohydrate in the grass biologically available to the cow. The cow puts the protein in the meat, takes carbohydrate, converts some of it to fat to put into the meat. It uses the carbohydrate to manufacture lactose, the disaccharide of glucose and galactose, and put that into its milk. The human can eat the muscle meat of the cow and get access to the protein and the fat. And the human cannot get access to the protein in the grass by eating the grass. But when the cow eats the grass, puts it into meat, that protein that originated in the grass is now biologically available to the human. But of course, the human cannot extract these nutrients out of the cow muscle meat. We have a microbiome of trillions of organisms that are not human. They're not plant, they're not animal. They're bacteria, protozoa, fungi. And what we eat feeds them, and their byproducts are the biologically available nutrients for us. We can take the cow's milk and drink it, and some of the nutrition is available to us, but a lot of it's not. We can put that milk in a glass jar and introduce certain cultures like lactobacillus, and by putting other organisms into the milk and letting those metabolize the lactose, fermenting dairy, making yogurt, kefir, cheese, and then things that were not biologically available to us in the raw milk now are. Other things interact with us differently after fermentation than before. This is the exact same thing as the cow eating the grass and letting its microbiome process the grass. We're just putting a microbiome into a glass jar of milk. I'm not advocating for or against the use of dairy or fermented dairy. I'm just using this as an illustration of how we should be evaluating it. Okay, so now we have nutrients entering into the human body. We have the macronutrients of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals. These are building blocks to build structures in our body. These are fuels to convert to energy and use. These are signals to hormone responses that change the way our body operates, changes the biochemical activity within our body. But we want to specifically trace the energy coming from the sun, making it into powering our cells. And the story gets even weirder from here. Whether we're metabolizing carbohydrates, fat, protein, it all eventually gets boiled down to adenosine triphosphate, ATP. And in the process where we actually get access to energy, and adenosine is cleaved from ATP, making it adenosine diphosphate. And when this happens, energy is released, and it's transmitted through the mitochondria into our cells. And this is the energy that began as sunlight that is powering us. And one thing that's weird here is that the mitochondria, the powerhouse of our cells, it has its own genome. It's technically not in the human genome. Mitochondria evolved from bacteria, and this is probably the original bacteria that ultimately formed into fungi and became the primary building block of the original animal cells. And so we carry this as a part of us, but genetically, we're not quite sure whether to consider mitochondria human or another organism that we're in deep symbiosis with. And so it's for all of this that I think we need to include all 5 kingdoms of life in any discussion of nutrition, especially when we're comparing different styles of nutrition. Carnivore, vegan, carnivore with fruit, vegan with fish, either one with fungi, mushrooms, which are not plants or animals. So I'm going to leave you with a question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And this is especially for my carnivore friends and my vegan friends. Should mushrooms be on your plate? To my carnivore friends, mushrooms are not plants. Mushrooms are more closely related to animals than they are to plants. Mushrooms inhale oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide. Animals evolved from fungi. Genetically, fungi could be seen as proto-animals. It might be actually a carnivorous thing to eat fungi. And I have a fun speculation that might be a useful thought experiment. We like to point out that the egg yolk has everything needed to take an embryo into a full chicken, and it's optimized to build the nervous system, including the brain, first. So when we see that eating egg yolks is good for human brain development, it might be correlation, but it seems that the same mechanisms that help form a baby chicken's brain are the same mechanisms that are good for our brain health. Well, what if all animals evolving out of fungi implies that the fungi kingdom has all the genetic material required to form an animal, to form the idea of an animal? So what if there are certain nutrients in fungi that we are very well suited to benefit from? There seems to be evidence that lion's mane mushroom encourages neurogeneration, the creation of new brain cells. Well, what if this is because in the evolution of fungi into animals, what if the lion's mane mushroom is what donated the genetic material that led to the development of the animal brain? And what if it's because of this that when you consume it, it does what it's genetically programmed to do, and that's to build brain cells? This is all just speculation, but I think it's more than enough information to cause us to at least look at fungi as a potential food source. To my vegan friends, should mushrooms be on your plate? They're more closely related to animals than they are to plants. I know they put the mushrooms in the produce section, but if they're going to rank them genetically, the mushrooms probably should be in the meat section, not the produce section. And if you consider yourself vegan and you believe that mushrooms are healthy for you, I'm not saying you should stop, but I don't think you can say you're 100% plant-based. Fungi are not plants. They are not animals, but they are living organisms. And I know the omnivores out there are saying, why are you guys hung up on eating plants, eating animals? Why don't we find what's healthy for humans to eat? The presence of our shriveled up appendix tells you that at one point in our history, we could digest that grass. We've since lost that ability, but if we put that grass, cabbage, into the right culture of other organisms, maybe the nutrients in that cabbage become biologically available to us. I'm not saying they do, but I'm saying that it's probably worth considering. So that's my story, and I'm probably sticking to it. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Please engage in the comments. And at the same time this is publishing, I'm also publishing my 5 Kingdom Protocol, where I jump straight into what I'm eating today, where my diet might be going. And of course, there'll be lots of follow-on videos later where we dive into individual topics, and we'll continue to flesh out this idea. Thanks for being here, and I look for the next opportunity for us to talk.